Hey everybody, how are you doing? It's Ian, and today I'm just going to introduce you to calendar customs. So far, we've been talking about rites of passage, which are focused on the individual. They are the movement, once again, they are the movement of an individual through a group, and it's observed by the individual, by the group. The individual is changing a position, is changing a status, whether they're coming in, whether they are leaving, or whether they are going through the various stages that the group has determined are stages within that group. Adolescence, adulthood, from single to married, from fertile to infertile, whatever. And that change brings with it new rules, new sets of expectations, and this sort of scary moment of being in this neither nor. And there's a ceremonial thing that talks, as it were, talks the individual through this change. And what's more, it communicates to the group that despite the fact that individuals shift, that the individuals that comprise the group have different statuses over the course of their life. The group itself has this continuity. A calendar custom is much more focused on the group itself. A calendar custom is, if the definition doesn't immediately scream at you from the term calendar custom, an event that is celebrated regularly, typically annually. That has to do with the group gathering at propitious moments of the year and celebrating something. And you don't need to be too much of an armchair anthropologist to suggest that people at one stage or another recognized a recurrence that happened. They recognized that with a certain amount of regularity, let's just say somewhere between every 360 to 370 days, or somewhere basically between every 12 and 13 phases of the moon, or with some kind of periodicity, recognize that, well, the weather is very much like it was in that time past. And the animals are behaving very much in the time past. And the sun is in the sky very much in the time past. And that there is a recurrence. Again, this is an imaginative exercise. This isn't fostering some kind of, or foisting some kind of psychology. Just the recognition of patterns. And it's not too much of an armchair anthropologist to say that they looked around and said, well, there is continuity. There's this pattern that is repeated. And yet, at the same time, in the intervening year, we've died. Members have died. Members have grown older. Members have changed. New members have come in. And so, it's not too far to suggest that one of the things that is occurring is, again, like the rite of passage, this sense of constant change and yet constancy, a sense of continuity. And that this time is very much like the time last year. This group is very much like the group last year, despite the fact that there might have been some changes in the intervening period. And with that, with the year, and with the different moments of the year, the different moments of the year allow for different kinds of activity. And you might recognize that, well, about this time last year, the fruits came in, and so we harvested. Or about this time last year, it was the longest night, and we hadn't done any work for a number of weeks at that point. Not that they measure time by weeks, but we're imagining. Or this time last year, it was the longest day, and it was the height of the warmth and the height of light. And you start to associate human activities, harvests, primarily, hunting, primarily, animal husbandry, primarily, perhaps. Let's just begin with that. And the organization, and because it's not simply this accident, it's not this sort of passivity, it's the organization of time and the organization really of work and the labor that is required in order for a group to exist. You start to see those patterns recurring time and again. It's like, And so one of the early ideas about custom and calendar custom is particularly these sort of festive occasions when, at the end of the season, the harvest is done. That's the last of the last of the plants have been reaped, or the last of the barley or whatever it is have been reaped, and it is a time of plenty, and is a time to momentarily pause and give thanks, be grateful, revel, enjoy, propitiate whatever belief system, whatever personality that you have in a belief system that you imagine helped continue this. Pray for further continuity and enjoy each other's company. And then go back and resort to the regular times of the world, times of day. One of the things to think about calendar custom, like a rite of passage as well, is that they are special times. They're special times that the entire group orients itself around. So they are marked on the calendar. They are seasonal. Moving away very radically from our hypothetical early community to the present day, we see that our entire world is oriented around these calendars. Our work life is scheduled around this time. We have semesters where work is intense, and we have semesters like the summer semester where quite frequently you're not taking classes, you're doing something else. We have, with the advent of fall, we see stores gear up for the various festivals and holidays that take place in the autumn. So, pumpkin spice latte comes out, and the Halloween decorations, and the Christmas decorations, and the Remembrance Day moments, and then everything is oriented around that time. But we have these moments, again, regular occurrences, regular days, regular times, where we work, we gather in small situations, and we have periods of leisure, of course, but then there are times that are marked. They are marked because they are special. They are the group momentarily pausing as one and engaging in some kind of recognition of that sense of continuity. A year has passed. As we move past the harvest metaphor, we might have sacred narratives that become associated with particular times of year. So we have Christmas and Easter in the Christian tradition. We have Eid. We have Ramadan in the Islamic tradition. We have Passover. We have Yom Kippur. We have Yom HaShoah in the Jewish tradition. We have Diwali. We have Moon Festival. We have, and of course, it's our contemporary narratives as well. So we have Treaty Day. We have Canada Day. We have the 4th of July. We have Thanksgiving. Things that are associated with a certain amount of seasonality, but not necessarily due to their position in nature and the association that we might have with nature, unlike perhaps other forms of festivals or other forms of custom that are much more oriented towards the solar year, like Halloween or midsummer festivals or midwinter festivals, having to do with the shift in the length of days, but rather associated with political moments or historical moments, or again, our sacred narrative moments. But we stop, we pause, and we pattern our activity everything from we decorate our houses, often, not always, not all holidays are house decoration, but many are. We might have particular clothes that we wear on those days. We might have particular foods that we wear on those days. There might be particular movies that we watch on those days. There might be particular songs that are associated with those days. And we momentarily focus our attention on celebrating this. And I will emphasize, as I always do, or at least I always try to do, that one of the rationales for doing this, and often the primary rationale, is that it is fun. Is that we seek out opportunities to gather together to break from the responsibilities of our normal everyday world and do something different for difference's sake, for conviviality's sake, for congregation's sake, for gathering's sake. Because it is joyful, it doesn't actually require an additional rationale. So as much as we can take any calendar custom and pick away at some kind of history behind it, and some kind of like, oh, there's some narrative that is being reenacted, because that's an important part of calendar custom. It is very much in that Turner sense of some kind of ritual drama where we re-perform, sometimes literally and sometimes just figuratively, but we perform something of our sort of sacred narratives. The American Thanksgiving meal is, in many aspects, a recreation of that legendary, I will use that term as a folklorist would, up to a whole bunch of debate, and yet seems to have a certain constancy in how the group understands itself, that legendary pilgrim meal with the First Nations people gathering together, celebrating their first successful year as vicious colonizers. And then the meal that takes place in the home is a ritualized reproduction of that first Thanksgiving meal in Plymouth. And that's part of the narrative. Our Christmas celebrations, they might be much more, we might actually literally engage in pageants. We have ostensive behaviors in terms of things like the ostension is when we communicate legend and belief not through narration but through enactment. And so we might have ostensive behaviors like leaving out milk and cookies for Santa Claus, and say, oh, we are communicating to children that Santa Claus is coming. So we'll participate in those narratives. And Christmas is a good example of a calendar custom that has different narratives that are all superimposed on each other. The sacred narrative of the Nativity, coupled with the very rich and thick popular culture narrative of Santa Claus, which has St. Nicholas narratives associated with it, and Sinterklaas, and all sorts of things, all bundled up and tied into each other, because they're complex. Like all calendar customs, like all folklore, we have this thing, and there is a set of expectations that goes with it, but we individually, or in a very small group, we determine how it is going to play out in a given year. We have fluidity, we have dynamism, it's open to interpretation. We do not need to perform it as a sacred thing. We can be performing it as a very performative, we can do it ironically, but that we are still conditioned in this way. So we got together, and they still have the same kind of patterns to them. We can make an argument that even though they are not marking a transition in the same way that a rite of passage is, they still nevertheless have these periods of liminality associated with them. This time outside of time, because the event is lowercase s sacred. It's the group getting together and reaffirming that as much as things change, things stay the same. And at this time, we engage in different behaviors. We engage in emotions that are bigger. We celebrate we celebrate the act of leisure. We celebrate the act of congregating for congregation's sake and not simply for the utility's sake of day to day. We We indulge in richer foods. We indulge in dance. We indulge in movement. We indulge in play. And we do these things that we might not have time to do in our regular occurrence. And again, one of the reasons that we do this is because it is fun, and that is a tautological that is a tautological rationale for doing something. But more than anything, we can point out these moments of specialness that are regularly occurring. When we talk about the carnivalesque in within the concept of rites of passage, we're really getting that from calendar custom. We're getting that from carnival, from that time between. Again, you can tie it to a number of different moments, but I mean, carnival is specifically the days leading up just before Lent. So in the Christian calendar, it is the time just before you are going to go into 40 days of fasting. Yes, it has a sacred narrative associated with it, but it is also just the tail end of winter and just before spring. And so like the last fruits, the last stores of winter are almost used up. And then the end of Lent, Easter, is that time when the first fruits are just beginning to come, or the first lambs are just becoming to be born. So it's even though it is embedded in a sacred narrative, in the Christian sacred narrative, it is just as much a calendrical harvest association. But we're about to go off for Lent, and we have this time of saying goodbye to flesh. We're going to be fasting, so carne vale. Vale is in valedictorian, farewell. Carne is in chili con carne, flesh. And so it's a farewell to flesh. It's a celebration of flesh, and flesh as much in terms of meat as it is in terms of fleshiness, being embodied. So it is about sex. It is about sexuality. It is about gluttony. It is about the sensory experiences. And it is the kind of thing that you engage in that you don't necessarily engage in on the reg, on your normal day. Certainly you're about to give it up entirely for the austere period of Lent. But at this time, it is still markedly distinct from how you normally cavort. So it's a public occasion, and it is embodied in practice and dance. And again, it's not sex in terms of like public displays of intercourse, but it is very much a sexualized and sensual moment. You see that in New Orleans, and you see that in Trinidad, and all these sort of elements of very specific Mardi Gras or Carnival, where it is the body is important. Now that doesn't, but again, it is lived. It's important to remember that these are things that you are doing. They can become spectacle. You have this strange aspect of other people looking and not quite understanding. And there's, if you ever take courses in festival and you talk about carnival and so on, it's the problems of how we understand these things when we're only viewing them through a frame, how they become something that is seen. Whereas in the moment of festival, it is something that you participate in. You are there, and everybody is performing, and performance is happening all around you as opposed to focused on a stage. There is no real distinction between performer and audience. You are, sometimes you're a performer, sometimes you're audience, but you've reinterpreted public space and are performing within it. And then the things about rites of passage, the things about calendar customs, the things about festivals, is that they end. That what makes them special is the fact that they are ephemeral. They only exist for a couple of days. Now, they only exist for a couple of days, despite the fact that they have continuity through time. But you need Boxing Day. You need it. You need Christmas to be over. At the end of Ramadan, you need Eid Mubarak. You need these things to transition and then reincorporate back into the day-to-day. So calendar custom, we're going to be going through a year, and I'm starting with, because by the time this falls in the semester. Usually it's just about time for Halloween, but we're going to be doing Day of the Dead instead. And the readings are ordered in a calendrical way. That's actually the first one we do on a basis. We're going to start actually with Jack Santino, who does a year cycle. So just in the same way that Jacqueline Simpson did Cradle to Grave, Santino does the year round, and sort of give an overview of this pattern and some of the general arguments about calendar custom, some of which informed what I'm talking about, and some are slightly different. But anyway, so this is it. We are on our way to talking about the next large category of custom. Enjoy. And as you look at these various readings, think about that sense of both how the group redefines itself, and maybe this wasn't clear, that redefines itself in part by recommitting to the theme of that special occasion. And that this group is defined in part by finding this thing meaningful, which again seems self-fulfilling, circular. But the overarching theme or the underlying theme of a holiday, particularly ones that are often about where the theme is really just gathering together and being thankful that we have the opportunity to gather together, is one of those. It's just an overarching theme. So, you do Thanksgiving because you're giving thanks not necessarily to the harvest, but to the family that you can regularly do Thanksgiving with. Similarly with Christmas. Yeah, and yes, it's going to be coated in the symbols that you have inherited, the symbols that come before you. But that doesn't mean that it is about committing to those symbols. That's just, you use those symbols as the language for the way that you communicate that underlying message of gathered together, and this group is important to me, and this group has continuity in time, and people who are no longer of this group were nevertheless influential, and people who are brand new to this group are going to be its key members years on in. So think about those. It's always a matter of type inversion. It's always a matter of a pattern that has emerged, and we make something new from it. We recreate it. We recreate it. Each one is an iteration. Each one is a creation. Each one is a performance. And how our entire culture can be scheduled, at least, around these times. Okay. I'm done. Enjoy the readings. There's... after the general one of Santino, there's 8 specific ones, and I think you will like the variation that I have. Everything from hardcore, classic rites of passage, calendar customs, like Mummering in Newfoundland, to Star Wars Day, May the 4th. Good stuff. All right, be well, my friends, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.